Here are the top posts from ExplainLikeImFive on the 16th of November 2019. ExplainLikeImFive. What exactly are the crystals in an LCD and what happens to them when the screen is turned off? Kletch 2. Hey, I'm gonna try to explain this, smiley face. To understand how it works, you need to know light is like a wave, which vibrates in a fixed direction in space. It's called polarization. So when lights travel in a said direction, it can be polarized in any direction through the 360 degrees around its line of propagation. Crystals in LCD screens are in a phase between solid and liquid matter. It's like a liquid matter, but that keeps the organization of its molecules in a very specific order. Imagine all the molecules are facing the same direction. That gives them the property to change, or not, the polarization of the light passing through it, depending of their excitation. So there is green, red and blue crystals in your screen, and the combination of the three make one pixel. The system of light emission emits light when your screen is on, and it goes through 3 steps before exiting the screen and going to your eyes. 1. A horizontal polarizer, which forces the incoming light to be horizontally polarized. 2. The colored crystal. 3. A vertical polarizer, which only lets through the light if it's polarized vertically. If the crystal is switched on, the property of the specific liquid crystal changes the polarization of light to be vertical. So the light going through the crystal can exit the screen. It also has changed the color of the light depending of which crystal. Blue, red or green, it was. If the crystal is switched off, there is an electricity current flow through the crystal and its property to change polarization is disabled. Therefore, the light passing through the crystal is still horizontally polarized, and doesn't go through the vertical polarizer. When your screen is switched off, there is no electric current going through the crystals, so you can say they are all switched on. But as there is no light emitted from the back of your screen, no light is exiting. If you want to know more, edit. Forgot to mention what happened when you shut down your screen. Fork. Imagine that there's a picket fence covering the display. Light passes between the pickets. Not as much as when the fence isn't there, but a good amount. Now think of the crystals as another picket fence in front of the one I just described. When they're lined up, the same amount of light passes through. But when the crystals are activated, that flips the direction of the pickets 90 degrees. Now there are no gaps in the pair of fences for light to get through.
Fire Duck 3000. Take the lenses of the 3D glasses you get at movie theater. If put them against each other and rotate one, you will either be able to see clearly though the more see nothing. This is because each lens is a filter that only lets through a specific type of light based on its rotation. An LCD monitor works in the same way. It starts with a backlight consisting of pixels each with a red, green, and blue light. This light is then passed through 2 of these filters, where their rotation determines how much light of each color gets through. When all of the filters are not letting light through, you have a black screen, but all the lights in the back are still turned on. When you turn the screen off, all the backlights finally turn off.
RIPTOFUTURE. ExplainLikeImFive. How does a government nationalize an industry?
Ginger Penguin. BT is a public company, so in theory the government can buy enough shares and force a hostile takeover. Many companies have little choice with nationalization, as the alternative is often liquidation. In these cases the owners would sell the business and its liabilities for a token amount, usually £1, and the government would take ownership of all assets and debts. BT is a heavily regulated business anyway, so it wouldn't be too much of a reach to legislate some form of additional tax and government board seats that would effectively place ownership of BT in the government hands. Finally, it's the government. They have an army, so can basically do what they like. After all, if the last 3 years has taught us anything, Parliament is sovereign. TBH, though I'm not even sure he can force much through under EU laws.
MJ Murcott. It buys up all the shares, normally in the form of a compulsory purchase. But this is normally very expensive, and a government would have to increase taxes significantly or borrow large amounts of money if they were to nationalize BT.
McCoy Gian. Plata or plomo? The gold price or the iron price? As Narcos and Game of Thrones have reminded us, there are two ways for powerful people to do things. Plata, gold. There have been 15 nationalizations in the UK over the past 70 years. In each situation, the government paid market value for the companies, which is the price that the company would get if it was sold to someone other than the government. In one case, the government nationalized a bank called Northern Rock. The people who owned it said that they weren't paid market value, so they sued the government for more money. Unfortunately for them, the bank was insolvent, so their claim wasn't justified. Insolvent is when you can't pay debts. Bankruptcy is when the court decides how you will stop being insolvent. Usually developed countries only nationalize companies that are insolvent to protect their economies. It's similar to a bailout. It's very rare for governments to nationalize companies that aren't insolvent. The few times they have done so, they just paid market rates and bought the companies. Plomo, iron. There are many examples of developing countries nationalizing companies below market rates. In those situations, it's usually a give us ownership of your company for a token sum or we'll execute you type of thing. As soon as you have the biggest militia in a country, you can take over the government. Then you are the legitimate ruler of the country, and you can force other people in the country to turn over their property or you'll kill them, monsieur. The only hiccup is if some of the owners of a given company live in another country and or there are international treaties governing how a country handles this. Then the other countries have to figure out what to do in response to a violated treaty. They usually have plumo and iron too. Ultimately, nationalization is a modern-day example of how people with the guns get to make the decisions. If they want, they can pay market price to the no-gun people with voluntary consent. Or they can pay below market price to no-gun people without consent. Developed countries usually go with the first approach, and developing countries traditionally have gone with the latter. The question of rights is irrelevant because the organization that is supposed to be protecting your rights is the one that is infringing upon them, monsieur. Nationalization and international law are pretty interesting topics in my opinion because they remind us that government, taxes, democracy, private property, human rights, etc., are all social constructs. These things don't exist for the millions of other species that exist in the wild. They didn't exist for humans for millions of years. Then a few thousand years ago, we invented these concepts. We are so used to thinking of these social constructs as rigid. We often forget that they only exist through collective action. Buttbanger 69. ExplainLikeImFive. Why is it so easy for a spark from a flint or other source to light a gas such as propane or butane, but the hot from a cigarette won't do it or struggles to?
Two-head WLF. It's because cigarettes burn at a fairly low temperature, around 400 degrees Celsius. More towards the middle of the glowing end, a bit less towards the edges. The spark from a lighter flint can get up to around 3000 degrees Celsius. Butane has an ignition temperature of 405 degrees Celsius. So, a cigarette could do it, but it's borderline.
Nexo 1. Simple. The cigarette doesn't burn hot enough and the sparks from a flint striking iron do. I don't know about butane or propane gas, but you could literally put a cigarette out in gasoline. I wouldn't recommend people try this, but I have seen it done. Nudity. What do you base this on? 'Cause I'm pretty sure a lit cigarette is not something you want to keep close to a high-pressure container of propane.
Mini trucker. ExplainLikeImFive. Why can't we make ourselves sneeze manually? Jimbo. We didn't evolve with ever having a need to sneeze manually. If something is in the airways, an automatic sneeze has always been more than sufficient to clear it. Same reason why we can't pump our own heart manually or control our glands. There has never been an advantage to having manual control over those things. So we never developed it. In fact, having manual control over some of those could do us more harm than good. Abstracken. My father pulls out a nose hair to sneeze. Seems to work. I've never felt the urge to emulate his behavior. Michilio. I don't get it. You can. Not from wishing to sneeze, but you can easily trigger a sneeze. Snort some pepper, look straight at the sun, or my favorite. Pluck a nostril hair. Guaranteed sneeze. Username Mirek. ExplainLikeImFive. How does bacteria multiply in places that don't have biological matter?
Thajo 070. Biological matter isn't some special class of matter. It is just a particular arrangement of the same matter that makes everything else. Organisms then can survive and replicate as long as they have fuel in the raw materials available. For example, plants need sunlight, water, and air.
Vladcat. The bacteria will multiply until it runs out of stored energy. Then it would need biological matter. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.